Winter. Cold, wet, and deadly. Every year, snowstorms strand hundreds of people in their cars, isolate thousands in their homes, and kill those who are unprepared. In this film, you will see and hear true stories about 6 people caught in severe winter weather and isolated from help. Ed and Paul Maluski were going to their cabin to button it up for the winter when it began to snow.
The storm hit about halfway up the mountain. By the time we got about a mile from our cabin, we kept getting stuck every 10 feet.
We were always out digging, which got us wet. Then the snow got real heavy, and you couldn't see 5 feet in front of you. It was pretty clear the Bronco wasn't going to make it, so we figured we'd walk to a neighbor's cabin. It wasn't real far, and we know that area like the back of our hands.
The funny thing is, everything changes at night. With the blizzard, you couldn't tell which way you were going. I thought I knew, but boy, I just couldn't tell for sure.
Dad! Leave this pack here! We don't need it! There's food in the cabin!
You know, it was funny. I'd be thinking real clear for a while, and then just didn't know what I was doing or where I was going. I couldn't even remember Paul's name. My own boy, and I couldn't remember his name.
I got worried wading through that snow. Dad was really beat. He could barely keep up. I started thinking about things I'd never thought about before. I fell and dropped our flashlight and didn't pick it up right away like you normally would. I knew we were getting delirious then. Then we hit that gate. Well, it's nowhere near the cabin.
We've gone too far! Let's go back to the Bronco!
Whoa, we can't go back. We wouldn't make it. I wouldn't make it. We've got to find that cabin or we can't make it. Now, come on, we've got to find that cabin.
From then on, I just kept thinking, you gotta keep going. You gotta keep pushing.
I saw that cabin and said one long prayer. I could hardly believe we finally found it. We walked for 2.5 hours and it was less than a half mile from the Bronco. All I could think was, we had to get inside. We finally got in. And then we didn't say anything at all. We didn't talk.
Ed and Paul had become victims of hypothermia, a physical condition caused by a person's body losing more heat than it produces. The result? A dangerously low body temperature. When Ed and Paul were outside, the conditions were perfect for hypothermia to set in. It was cold, and they were tired and wet. First, their bodies tried to generate more heat to combat the cold. They began to shiver. It was a losing battle. The constant exposure to cold, wet weather defeated this first line of their body's defense. Then, in order to keep the remaining heat concentrated in the body core, the brain, heart, and lungs, their bodies began to cut down blood circulation to their arms and legs. This gave their vital organs a fighting chance to continue functioning. But it also caused the loss of muscle control in their hands, legs, and arms. As their natural defenses gradually began to break down, they became more confused and disoriented. If they had not found the cabin, the cold would have defeated all their body's defenses, and they would have died. In this kind of emergency, the first thing to do is get out of the cold. Then, carefully begin rewarming the body. The most important areas to rewarm first are those areas nearest the body core, the sides of the chest, the neck, the groin, and the head. These are the areas of highest heat loss and highest heat absorption. Warming these areas first lets the body build back and hold its heat, starting with the body core and gradually spreading to the rest of the body. Ed and Paul did not rewarm themselves correctly. They began by warming their hands and feet, and that could have killed them. Warming the body's extremities first forces cold blood to flow back to the body core. The result is usually death. Paul went to bed that night shivering uncontrollably because his body had not been rewarmed properly. Both men needed medical assistance desperately. It's a miracle they survived. Part of the miracle was the cabin they broke into. It was owned by a man who believed in being prepared for anything.
Once we got warmed up, we found plenty of wood for the fire. Besides, there was a propane tank to heat the cabin too.
There was plenty of food, enough to last us a couple of weeks. And you could eat it right out of the can. You didn't need a stove to cook it on.
Nothing. Well, they know we're gone. Yeah, they should.
Candles, flashlights, lanterns. All were on hand with plenty of batteries and fuel to keep them working. Ed and Paul even found a battery-powered radio. It was a relief to hear that rescuers were out looking for them. The cabin had a well-stocked first aid kit, too. Ed and Paul were stranded way up in the mountains, far from any help. But even in a city, snowstorms can be dangerous, especially for the elderly. The elderly can fall victim to hypothermia even at home. It's essential for them to maintain warm room temperatures of 68 degrees Fahrenheit or more. Continued exposure to low room temperatures can easily cause older people to become hypothermic, and it is very difficult to detect.
Your turn now.
They usually don't shiver as hypothermia takes hold, but their breathing may become shallow and their heartbeat may slow down. Either of these symptoms during cold weather means medical help is needed immediately. The best cure, of course, for anyone is prevention. Stay warm all the time, eat well and regularly, and keep physically fit. These factors will help protect you from winter cold.
Did you get back to the clinic this morning? Good.
Like most people, Dennis Beam and his daughter Kelly weren't worried about the cold the night their car slid into a ditch in the middle of a blizzard.
I wasn't really too concerned. I'd been stuck before and it wasn't all that deep. But the wind kept picking up, and the storm just didn't let up. I was getting wet trying to get the car out, but it was no good, so I decided to wait. About 9 that morning, we'd been stuck about 4 hours. The storm wasn't stopping at all, and we were really getting cold. I figured nothing was going to happen up there on a country road. No help, period. So I decided to go for help. You stay warm and you stay in the car no matter what, okay?
Okay.
Everything's going to be okay. I love you.
Love you too.
Okay, now you be good. Right there. Right there, okay?
I didn't want to be left alone, but Dad said he'd be back for me. He promised.
Leaving Kelly was like leaving my heart behind, and I didn't know when I'd get it back. I couldn't see a thing. It was freezing. My eyes were frozen shut. I had ice all over my feet, but I had to keep going. There was nothing else to do.
Help! Please, this is Kelly Beam. We had a CB radio in the car, so I tried to call for help. Help! But no one answered. I kept wondering where Daddy was. Can you hear me?
It took me 3 hours to get to a house, and it was literally my last ounce of energy. My feet were black, parts of my face were frozen, but that wasn't my main concern. Kelly was still in that car, and the police said they couldn't get to her until the storm stopped, and there was nothing I could do.
After it got dark, I didn't know what had happened. I couldn't stop thinking about Dad. I had 3 pieces of candy, but I wanted to save them for Dad because I thought he'd be hungry when he came back.
After 10 hours, I didn't know what to think. She'd been alone so long. There was a lot of worry time then. Yeah. A lot of thinking time. Kelly's okay. I think. I had to leave her in the car.
Sometimes in the car, I dream that Daddy might not come back.
About 1 the next morning, the storm
thank
broke, and the police headed off to get Kelly.
Have you heard anything?
Nothing yet. All I could think was that after 19 hours, who knows, she'd been there so long with no heat. I kept hoping I'd put enough emphasis on staying in that car until I got back.
When the rescuers came, I asked if Dad was okay. He said yeah. I was glad, because it was all over and Dad was okay.
It's for you?
Yes. Thank God. And then the call came. She was
Where's she
okay. My whole world lit up then.
Oh, thank God. Thank you very much. Yes. Okay. She's okay.
Kelly suffered only mild symptoms of hypothermia. As the snow buried the car, it insulated and protected her from the severe cold and high wind. Dennis was badly frostbitten because of his walk through the snow. Which of the two had been in the most danger? Without a doubt, Dennis. As soon as he left the car, he put himself in tremendous jeopardy. Neither father or daughter were well prepared for the extreme weather conditions they encountered. A few carefully chosen items would have given them the extra margin of safety they needed. One blanket wasn't enough. Sleeping bags would have been better. Extra clothing would have been extremely welcome after Dennis got wet. Matches and candles. A flashlight with extra batteries. Signal flares. High-calorie, non-perishable food. A shovel and a sack of sand, ashes, or even kitty litter. And a first aid kit. These are examples of items you need. Winter travel is serious business, and you must be prepared for it. Your car should be in good working order. Know the route you plan to take, and tell somebody else where you're going and when you plan to arrive. Check the latest weather information before you leave. The National Weather Service provides up-to-the-minute weather forecasts and can predict most severe storms. If the people in our next story had listened to the weather forecast, they would be alive today. Traveling back to school, 2 students drove directly into a severe winter storm. They had a 4-wheel drive vehicle and were sure they could get through. First, they came upon a roadblock warning travelers to pull off the highway. They went around it. Several miles further, they got stuck in a large snowdrift directly under a bridge. They tried to dig out, but it was hopeless. Soaking wet, they changed clothes. Stuck in the snowdrift, isolated from help, they decided to sit it out. Wait until someone came along and found them. The next morning, someone did. They were dead. They had made 2 fatal mistakes. 1, traveling in the face of deteriorating weather conditions. And 2, ignoring a police roadblock. Ironically, it appeared that after they got stuck, they did everything right. They started the car every so often to keep warm. They changed into dry clothing after getting wet trying to dig out. And they didn't abandon their car. However, stuck under the bridge, the wind trapped fatal carbon monoxide fumes around and inside the car. A freak accident? Maybe. But they really died because they didn't use common sense. After those first 2 mistakes, every other decision only compounded their danger. Ed and Paul Milewski. Dennis and Kelly Beam could have been winter storm fatalities. The 2 students were. Being prepared for winter emergencies will always better your odds in a snowstorm. So will using good judgment and common sense. These guidelines, if you get caught in a severe snowstorm, will help you survive the cold.